Have you ever stopped to consider that maybe you're not the problem? That perhaps you're simply playing a role scripted long before you were born? Why do so many people repeat painful patterns, even when they know they'll hurt? Why do we keep choosing partners who leave us feeling lonely within our own love? It's as if we're dancing to a tune we didn't write, yet can't step away from. There's an invisible force shaping your decisions, and it's not fate. It's something older, deeper, something buried in the collective unconscious of humanity, in the stories we heard as children, in the mythical figures that populate our dreams, archetypes. They're everywhere, lurking in the shadows of our romantic choices. Picture a man who always pursues women who seem unattainable. He chases them with fervor, investing time, energy, emotion, until when he finally wins them over, he feels an odd emptiness. The desire fades, the conquest becomes a burden, and he flees. Not because he doesn't want to love, but because his heart has been wired to chase the unattainable, not to stay with it. This pattern is no coincidence, it's an archetype at work. In this man's case, it's likely the hunter, the one who thrives on constant pursuit, valuing only what remains out of reach. It is a behavioral model so deeply ingrained that he doesn't even realize he is being puppeteered by an ancient story, one written in his childhood or perhaps even in generations past. Here is the first reflective question for you. What are you tolerating today that your future self will resent? How many times have you justified toxic behaviors, calling them just a phase? How many times have you ignored clear red flags out of fear of being alone? You might say you love, but perhaps you're just keeping the machine running out of fear of silence. Let's dive into the world of archetypes. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This statement is too powerful to ignore. It reveals that many relationships that end in tears are, in fact, reenactments of internal dramas we don't even understand. We're actors on a stage where the script was written before we stepped into the spotlight. A classic example is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, the most gifted poet of ancient Greece, loses his beloved Eurydice and dares to descend into the underworld to retrieve her. Hades, the lord of the dead, allows her to return on one condition: Orpheus must not look back as he leads her to the surface. Halfway through, consumed by doubt, he glances back and loses Eurydice forever. This myth encapsulates something profound about modern relationships: the need for control, the grip of insecurity, the lack of trust. Many of us live relationships like this, chasing an idealized partner, building unrealistic expectations, and just when everything seems possible, sabotaging it all out of fear of losing control. This is what happens to so many who pursue love but flee when it draws near. They're prisoners of their own emotional drama, hostages to archetypes manifesting as automatic patterns. Now, let's bring in science. Recent neuroscience studies show that our brains form neural pathways based on repeated experiences. If, from a young age, we learn that love equals pain, abandonment, or conflict, our brain begins to associate those feelings with intimacy. Unconsciously, we attract situations that confirm this belief, even if they harm us. This explains why some people return to ex-partners who hurt them or choose emotionally distant partners. It's not a lack of self-love, it's conditioning. It's as if the brain says, "This is familiar, so it must be safe." But it's not. It's just known. Here is a surprising element. A 2023 study published in Nature Neuroscience found that emotional traumas can be transmitted epigenetically. This means that, even without directly experiencing a specific trauma, we may carry biological markers that predispose us to repeat certain patterns. In other words, the ghosts of the past may be written in your DNA. So, it's not just you, it's an entire legacy. A lineage of unresolved relationships, unhealed wounds, untold stories. Perhaps the person you fell in love with was merely a mirror, a reflection of something within you that needs healing, an archetype projected onto flesh and bone. When you fall in love, you're not loving a real person, you're loving an idea, a representation. And when that idealized image begins to crumble, you panic, you're confused, and you run. Here's the second reflective question. What character do you constantly play in your relationships? Are you the savior, the martyr, the seducer, the runaway. Each of these roles is backed by an archetype. Understanding which one you're automatically embodying can be the first step toward rewriting the script. In Norse mythology, there's a captivating figure named Loki. He's the god of chaos, change, and transformation. Loki never stays still. He disrupts, stirs, tests boundaries. But ironically, it's he who sparks profound transformations. Without Loki, nothing evolves. Perhaps you need to channel a bit of Loki in your love life. Disrupt the system. Question what you've always accepted as normal. Stop justifying the unjustifiable. Self-sabotage, by the way, isn't weakness. It's an archaic protection mechanism. It's how your body and mind try to keep you safe, even if it means preventing you from achieving what you most desire. Consider this. Sometimes, the greatest barrier between you and healthy love is yourself. Living without awareness is like being an NPC in your own game. You act, but you don't choose. You move, but you don't decide. You love, but you don't consciously choose to. Have you noticed how some relationships seem to have a predetermined outcome from the start? As if, despite all the good intentions in the world, you're walking in circles. It is as if an invisible force pulls you toward patterns you already know done at work. This isn't coincidence. It's the signature of archetypes. Let's circle back to the beginning. Carl Jung described archetypes as primordial forms or models residing in humanity's collective unconscious. They're universal figures appearing in myths, fairy tales, religions, and even our dreams. They shape our psyche before we even begin to think for ourselves. When it comes to relationships, we're talking about projections. We're talking about how we view love through the lens of these archetypes, and often without realizing it, we become them. A classic example is the tragic lover, so prevalent in literature and film. Think of Romeo and Juliet, La La Land, or Titanic. The story always feels the same. Two hearts meet, carrying a weight greater than they can bear. The love ignites fiercely, almost mystically, but it's doomed from the start. How many of us live like this? Intense, desperate loves that seem to mean everything, until, inevitably, they end. Not because they weren't meant to be, but because the emotional dynamic involved is unsustainable. The tragic lover doesn't seek balance. They seek passion, pain, redemption through suffering. If you recognize yourself in this, you may be replaying a role inherited from stories older than your own life. Stories told and retold within your family, your culture, your unconscious. But here's something few want to hear. You have power over this. Change begins when you stop seeing your relationships as random outcomes and start viewing them as mirrors. Every person who enters your life reflects something you still need to understand about yourself. This idea isn't new. It's hidden in myths, symbols, and ancient rituals. In shamanism, for instance, it's said that every encounter is an opportunity for healing. Each person is a lesson incarnate, a mirror showing you something you haven't yet seen. Let's imagine a fictional story. A woman named Clara always chose distant men who seemed interested but never took the next step. She suffered, waited, tried to change, but nothing worked. Until one day, she stopped looking for answers outside and turned inward. She discovered that since childhood, she'd learned that love came with absence. Her father worked too much. Her mother was emotionally unavailable. Without realizing it, she built a mental model of love, someone who's there but not truly present. Someone who seems available but offers no real connection. When she understood this, something shifted. She started noticing the signs earlier. She began choosing better, and surprisingly, the men she attracted began to change too. Because when you change internally, the world outside adjusts. Does this story sound familiar? Perhaps you too have been conditioned to tolerate less than you deserve. Maybe you've learned that love means sacrifice, silence, waiting. But true love doesn't hurt. It doesn't make you feel small. It doesn't leave you adrift. Here's the scientific element again. A 2024 study from Stanford University showed that people who develop emotional awareness tend to have healthier, longer-lasting relationships. This isn't just psychological, it's neurological. When you understand your own emotions, you stop projecting past traumas onto them. The brain by nature seeks efficiency. It prefers familiar paths, even if they're painful, because they're predictable. So if you learned early on that love is conflict, abandonment, or control, Your brain will keep seeking that, automatically, to maintain internal balance. But balance isn't synonymous with health. Sometimes it's just resistance to change. Here's the urgent element of this script. You have one life, and it's passing by. You can keep repeating the same mistakes, thinking somehow this time will be different. Or you can take responsibility for your role in these cycles. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it's necessary. In Greek mythology, there's another fascinating figure. Prometheus, the one who stole fire from the gods to give to humans. He symbolizes the desire for transcendence, the act of defying limits to achieve something greater, but he also represents the cost of it. For his rebellion, Prometheus was punished with eternal torment, chained to a rock where an eagle ate his liver every day. This may sound dramatic, but how many of us are being devoured alive by patterns we insist on repeating? Prometheus didn't die. He remained alive, bleeding, suffering, but with his essence intact. And perhaps this is the deepest metaphor for those seeking change. Transformation requires pain. It demands confrontation. It demands courage. It requires you to face your own personal myth. So, final question. What character do you constantly play in your relationships? The martyr, the savior, the runaway, the controller, the seducer, the caregiver, the lone hero. Each of these roles has an archetype behind it, and only you can decide whether to keep playing it or write a new script. Here's the counterintuitive revelation. Self-sabotage is an archaic protection mechanism. It's how your body and mind try to shield you from the unknown, even if the known hurts. It's the emotional security system that kicked in when you were a child, believing survival depended on adaptation, not authenticity. But you're no longer that child, you're an adult. And adults have choices. Living without awareness is like being an NPC in your own game. You act, but you don't decide. You move, but you don't choose. You live, but you don't fully feel. And now that you know, continuing to ignore it is a choice. Let's delve deeper into the nature of archetypes. Beyond the hunter or the tragic lover, there are countless others shaping our romantic lives. Consider the caregiver archetype, often seen in those who prioritize others' needs over their own. They give endlessly, hoping their love will be reciprocated, only to find themselves drained, unappreciated, or taken for granted. This archetype, rooted in myths of self-sacrificing figures like Demeter, the Greek goddess who nurtured the earth, can trap people in cycles of overgiving, unable to set boundaries. Or take the hero, the one who seeks to fix their partner or the relationship itself. They see love as a quest, a battle to be won. But when the battle is over, they often struggle to find meaning in the peace that follows, moving on to the next challenge. This archetype echoes figures like Hercules, whose life was defined by trials, never rest. Then there's the shadow archetype. Not a single role, but the hidden, unacknowledged parts of ourselves we project onto others. The shadow might manifest as jealousy, anger, or fear in relationships, qualities we refuse to see in ourselves, but readily criticize in our partners. Jung emphasized that confronting the shadow is essential for growth, yet most of us spend our lives running from it. Each archetype carries a story, a script we follow unconsciously. These stories aren't just personal, they're universal, etched into the human psyche across cultures and eras. The ancient Greeks told tales of gods and mortals to make sense of human behavior. The Norse wove sagas of tricksters and warriors. Indigenous cultures spoke of animal spirits guiding human paths. All these narratives point to the same truth. We are shaped by forces larger than ourselves, yet we have the power to reshape them. Let's explore another myth to illustrate this. In Hindu mythology, the goddess Kali embodies destruction and creation. She's fierce, terrifying, yet also a force of liberation. Kali destroys illusions, cutting through the ego's lies to reveal truth. In relationships, embracing a Kali-like energy might mean dismantling toxic patterns, even if it feels chaotic or painful. It's about burning away what no longer serves you to make space for something authentic. But how do you do this? How do you break free from archetypes that feel like second nature? It starts with awareness. Notice the patterns. Journal your relationships, past and present, and look for recurring themes. Are you always the one who chases? The one who sacrifices? The one who leaves? Naming the archetype at play is like shining a light into the dark corners of your psyche. Next, challenge the script. If you're the caregiver, practice saying no without guilt. If you're the hero, try finding value in stillness rather than conquest. If you're the tragic lover, seek relationships that prioritize stability over intensity. This isn't about suppressing the archetype, but redirecting its energy toward healthier expressions. Science backs this up. A 2022 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that intentional behavior change, actively choosing to act against ingrained patterns, can rewire neural pathways over time. It's not instant, but it's possible. Your brain is plastic, capable of learning new ways of being even in adulthood. Let's consider another fictional example. Meet Daniel, a man who always played the savior. In every relationship, he sought partners who needed rescuing, people struggling with addiction, emotional instability, or financial woes. He thrived on being their rock, their solution, but each time the relationship collapsed under the weight of his need to fix and their inability to change. Exhausted, Daniel began therapy and realized his savior archetype stemmed from a childhood where he felt responsible for his parents' happiness. By recognizing this, he started setting boundaries, choosing partners who didn't need saving. His relationships became less dramatic, more balanced, and for the first time fulfilling. This process isn't just psychological, it's spiritual. Many wisdom traditions teach that true transformation requires surrender, not to external forces, but to the deeper truth within you. In Buddhism, the concept of anatta, non-self, suggests that the ego, the I we cling to, is an illusion. By letting go of rigid identities, like the savior, the hunter, or the tragic lover, you create space for a more fluid, authentic self to emerge. Another tool for this journey is shadow work, a term Jung coined for confronting the hidden parts of yourself. Try this exercise. Write down 3 traits you dislike in your partner or ex-partners. Now ask yourself, where do these traits live in me? Be honest. The jealousy you see in them might reflect your own insecurity. The coldness you criticize might mirror your own fear of vulnerability. By owning these shadows, you stop projecting them onto others, freeing yourself to love more authentically. Let's revisit the science. Epigenetics, as mentioned earlier, suggests that inherited patterns can influence our behavior. But here's the hopeful part. Epigenetic changes are reversible. A 2024 study in epigenetics showed that mindfulness practices, therapy, and even strong social connections can alter gene expression, reducing the impact of inherited emotional patterns. You're not doomed by your ancestors' wounds, you can heal them. This brings us to a crucial point. Love is not just an emotion, it's a skill, it's a practice. Like any skill, it requires intention, effort, and unlearning old habits. The archetypes that govern your relationships are powerful, but they're not invincible. They're stories, and stories can be rewritten. Imagine another myth, this time from African folklore, the story of Anansi, the spider trickster. Anansi is clever, resourceful, and often selfish, but his antics lead to unexpected wisdom. In one tale, he tries to hoard all the world's knowledge, only to realize it's too vast to contain. His failure teaches him humility, connection, and the value of sharing. In relationships, an Anansi-like approach might mean letting go of control, embracing vulnerability, and trusting that love thrives in openness, not possession. Here's a practical step. Create a relationship myth for yourself. Write a short story where you're the protagonist, but instead of repeating old patterns, you embody the qualities you aspire to: courage, authenticity, balance. This exercise, rooted in narrative therapy, helps reframe your self-concept, aligning it with your desired future rather than your conditioned past. Let's reflect on another archetype, the eternal child. This archetype, seen in figures like Peter Pan, resists commitment, seeking endless freedom and play. In relationships, the eternal child might avoid deep intimacy, fearing it will trap them. If this resonates, ask yourself, what am I running from? Often it's not the partner, but the responsibility of facing your own depths. Conversely, there's the wise elder archetype, embodied in figures like Merlin or Yoda. This archetype values reflection, patience, and guidance. Tapping into the wise elder within you might mean slowing down, listening to your intuition, and choosing partners who align with your long-term growth, not just short-term sparks. Each archetype has light and shadow sides. The hunter's passion can inspire, but its restlessness can destroy. The caregiver's nurturing builds trust, but its self-neglect breeds resentment. The key is balance, embracing the strengths of your archetypes while softening their extremes. Let's tie this back to neuroscience. The brain's default mode network, active when we're introspecting or daydreaming, is where our sense of self resides. A 2023 study in Neuroimage found that mindfulness practices weaken unhelpful self-narratives in this network, allowing for more flexible self-perception. By meditating on questions like, "Who am I beyond this role?" you can loosen the grip of archetypes, creating space for new ways of being. One final myth to consider: the phoenix, a universal symbol of rebirth. Across cultures, the phoenix rises from its ashes, transformed. In relationships, your ashes might be failed romances, betrayals, or self-inflicted wounds. But from these you can rise anew, not by erasing the past, but by integrating its lessons. Here's a closing exercise. Sit quietly and visualize yourself shedding an old archetype like a snake shedding its skin. What does it feel like to let go of the savior, the tragic lover, or the eternal child? What emerges in its place? This visualization, grounded in somatic psychology, helps anchor your intention to evolve. You are not your patterns. You are not your archetypes. You are the consciousness that observes them, the author who can rewrite the story. Your relationships are mirrors, reflecting both your wounds and your potential. By facing these mirrors with courage, you reclaim your power to love, not as a scripted character, but as your true, ever-evolving self. Now breathe and let go of the roles you've outgrown. What remains is the freedom to write a new story, one where love is not a battlefield, but a sanctuary,